Hello and welcome to week one. Last week we had our official kickoff meeting for Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And this week we're gonna have a little review, and then we're going to delve into the theme: if you connect it, protect it. And so what did we learn last week? Well, let's take a look here. We're just going to go through a nice review what we went over last week. And really, we started delving into cyber risk, what it is, and how does it impact us. And so these are some things that, as we look into, we want to make sure that we have a good understanding of it. And so when it comes to cyber risk, we realize that it involves more than just technology. Because when we lose things due to technology not working, things that are connected to the internet, it can begin to affect us financially. It can cause a disruption in our business. It can cause legal and liability issues, reputational damage. And if there's anything that we've learned through this COVID-19, is that business interruption has impacted all of us. And could that have posed some cyber risk as well? Absolutely. Now you think about how many businesses began to send their employees working home. Now that began to expand their cyber risk, to increase it. Because as a result of this, we really didn't know what impact it would have, not knowing what their home networks were like, as opposed to the business network. What computers would they be using? And so as a result of this, brought in so many other factors that could really increase our cyber risk. And so it really doesn't matter how big or how small you are, it should be of concern to you. And so how do you manage it? Well, we talked a little bit last week that there are some things that business owners can do to stay profitable and productive. Now, we discussed 10 of those things last week. This week, we're going to focus on two main points. And these are actually the top two that are in the CIS top 20 security controls. And so these two that we're going to delve into will help to increase or get us started with cyber hygiene. So what do we mean by that? Well, if there's anything that we've learned through COVID-19, is we've learned how to practice better health hygiene. What do I mean by that? Well, we've learned that in order to minimize our risk of getting infected from COVID-19, what have you and I had to do more? Hand washing. Perhaps your hands are getting washed so many times they're starting to crack and get dry, so you're getting more lotion. But as soon as you do that, you have to wash them again. There's sanitizer. Or we're wearing face masks. Some are wearing face shields. We're practicing social distancing. And what is all this doing? It's allowing us to minimize our risk. We really don't trust anyone because we don't know where they've been, who they've spoken to. Are they infected? Are they not? Have I been exposed or not? And so this has helped us to keep ourselves safe and our families safe. But when it comes to cyber hygiene, we can do the same thing. We can have a certain practices at home to protect ourselves and our family from exposure to cyber criminals. And in fact, practicing good cyber hygiene can reduce your risk of attack by up to 85%. And so if you notice here on the screen, it has this statement: with the increasing interconnectivity of all of our systems and changes in how we conduct business, security weak spots and vulnerabilities are growing exponentially. So what does that look like for the future? Well, here we have our theme: if you connect it, protect it. This is a statistic, and looking at, well, what would things be like, things connected to the internet? They say by 2027, there would be over 41 billion devices connected to the internet. Gartner forecasts that by next year, there'll be 25 billion things connected and in use by 2021. But among these things that are connected, these billions of devices, that is what is causing our security to become weakened. It's through these connected devices that creeping people, things find their way into the network, collect data about us, our behaviors, and a sobering. The next two are really sobering statistics. That 75% of the infected the devices are routers. Now that's interesting, because most individuals, most households, businesses, they begin with perhaps a modem, and then they have a router of their own, whether they be Netgear, Linksys, they can be Sonic Walls, they can be of any model, security. There's weaknesses in all of them. These are the devices that have become infected. And in fact, it wasn't too long ago that there was a series of routers that were infected that created this botnet. And now they would take over all of your traffic, whether it was at home or at work. And any device, once it's plugged into the network, it says you have 5 minutes before it's exploited, before the attacks begin, and exploits happen within 24 hours. So we can see why we have our theme: if you connect it, you best protect it. So how do we manage this risk? These are sobering statistics. Well, what do we do? Well, as Mike mentioned, we're going to focus on two aspects that are part of these top 20 controls. One is know what you have. Now, we're going to focus on the hardware and the software, keeping an inventory of these things. Now, if you can do this, this will begin to help you to manage your risk. Because if you can identify your devices, that's the first stage. What do you have in your network? Are they Apple? Do you have Apple devices, Mac, Linux, Microsoft, Windows? You might say, well, I don't have Linux or Android, but many have security cameras and AV equipment, and majority of them are running some form of Linux system. That's an operating system. Those things also need to be updated. What are your printers? Those are operating systems. I identify all of the devices: laptops, desktops, smartphones, printers. And this inventory will now begin to serve as a guide, a checklist. Because now you have to see what can you do to update them. Now you may be wondering, how do I get an inventory of everything that's on my network? Well, there's many different types of software applications. One that is popular is Fing. Now, Fing will allow you to scan any network that you're connected to. Scan your wireless network, find all the devices, anything that has an IP address, and will help you to identify what might be a switch, what might be a router, anyone or anything that is connected to your network. And now that is very important, because now you can begin with baseline and have all of your applications, all of your devices at any time, visible when they're on your network, when they're not. What's the next? You might think of some of the dangers that could come with this. Well, we talked about the devices, but what about the software? Each of these devices has software. Are they being updated? That's a good question. And in fact, how do you protect them? The majority of them have some way of logging in to these devices. So that means a username and a password. And also remember that once these devices are connected, then within 5 minutes, attacks can begin. They can be targeted by specific exploits within 24 hours, meaning that attackers can be located anywhere in the world, and they're continuously scanning the address base of target organizations, target countries, just waiting for new devices to appear, to go on, come online, come offline. This could be bring your own devices that you take to work. It could be company, enterprise devices, or whatever the case. If they're out of date, then they might already be compromised. But what could happen if someone got a hold of your username and password, let's say for a camera? Well, this is a news story that appeared on ABC News. And this helps us to see what happens when it hits us at home.
Those recent chilling invasions of privacy.
That tree is looking really, really good, guys.
Played out in home after home.
Who is that? I'm your best friend. I'm Santa Claus.
With hackers peering in, at times taunting residents through their Ring camera systems.
What's up, homie? I still see you.
Now
well, let's make sure that we
prompting a class action lawsuit. A father of 3 in Alabama filing the suit, accusing Ring and its owner Amazon of lax security standards.
The allegation is that they had the tools at their disposal to make their system more hack-proof, but they didn't do it.
John Baker Orange claiming the Ring camera above his garage was hacked, allowing a stranger to talk to his kids, encouraging them to get closer to the camera as they played basketball on the driveway. Ring has stated the incidents across the country were in no way related to a breach or compromise of Ring's security. The CEO sharing this explanation on the Tamron Hall show last week.
What happened was this came from an outside, someone using the same username and password elsewhere that was gained from that, and then they logged into that user's account through that.
But the lawsuit alleges Ring was blaming customers for failing to create strong security passwords to distance itself from liability, saying the company failed to provide sufficiently robust security measures such as two-factor authentication.
It really strikes a chord in the heart of everyday Americans, and I do think that they have leverage in that regard when it comes to any settlement negotiations.
And Ring is staying silent on this, saying the company does not comment on pending litigation.
So then you may wonder, what's the danger there? We have many situations in which these devices could become compromised. So you can imagine the horror that some of these families must have gone through when they heard a voice coming through. But what was the real problem?
So I see the issue here is the families that have these systems in place may not know that these security settings are available because they probably didn't read the fine print.
That's a nice comment, Elizabeth. Yeah, that is the case. Many times we just log in and we don't read and apply some of the security settings that may be available. They mentioned what, two-factor authentication.
So according to his comment, there wasn't necessarily a breach on the Ring side, but the customer's account still got hacked. What would be the best thing to do if I have this system in place and maybe I don't know how to change all these settings in order to make it more secure for myself?
Well, the best thing to do, they mentioned that perhaps become from other breach companies, that passwords and usernames were out. And if they were reused, well, then they would just try anything that could have been connected to any of these users.
So rather than using the same username and password for different applications that I may use, I should have a unique username and password for example, my Ring system that I don't use for anything else.
Absolutely. And then you need to implement multi-factor, two-factor authentication.
Although that could be annoying.
It could be, and it may take a little more time to log in. But the beauty of that is even if someone were to guess your unique password, they would also need your other code to get into your account.
So anytime somebody's trying to log into my Ring account, for example, I would be notified of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And this has come up even in the businesses. We've had business owners and managers, perhaps they use other applications, whether it's an email application or they use Dropbox or any other sharing application or email. And sometimes they find new devices attached to their account that they don't know who they are. So are you monitoring those things? Check the event log on many of these applications. Find out, were there any logins somewhere else? We've assisted other companies with their applications, such as email login, and inevitably, what we have found is that there were login attempts from China, Russia, all different parts of the world. And we know they weren't here in the States and in those other countries at the same time. So finding out what are some of these applications that might be impacting. So with the inventory of applications, we talked about how you might be able to use Fing to find out what's on the network. But what about applications that you can use that just perhaps go to your computer and go into your add remove section and take a listing of all the programs that are installed. That will allow you to begin to get a baseline. But the last video on Ring was talking more about applications, someone logging in. Well, what about a rogue device? Would you know if a device on your network had been compromised or not? This might be a computer. It could even be a camera system or something else. Notice this next dramatization Cisco did is the anatomy of an IoT hack.
The race is on to get a fully self-driving car to market.
Autonomous car company Opticon promises
Cars that drive themselves. Opticon's new cars
Joining conference now.
Destroyed data and deleted the backups. We can recover most of it, but some of the research may be gone for good. According to the forensics, they may have had access to the blueprints.
The FBI arrested a San Francisco man in connection with last month's Opticon.
Hey, Brian, can I get you anything? Coffee or soda or something?
No.
So, walk me through it, step by step.
Well, I took over the website to a bowling alley.
Brian, this is not a joke.
Okay, look. They have this research facility down the peninsula, and they're working on optical tracking cameras for driverless cars. So, just searching through social media, I get the names of a whole bunch of engineers who are working there. And as I'm looking them up, I come across this bowling league where a bunch of tech companies play every Wednesday. And this is an old school bowling alley with this really ancient website. And it has all the league info, company names, player names.
Okay, so you hacked into a bowling alley website.
Yeah.
All right, explain how that works.
It's called an iframe injection attack. It's this old exploit that hits anyone that visits the website. So a week later, this guy from Opticon suddenly has my malware on his laptop. I couldn't believe it worked. It was like a joke.
What does that get you?
Well, the next day he goes to work and he opens his laptop and he connects to the network. And that's it. I'm in.
Yeah, but that still doesn't get you inside. I mean, they discovered it. They wiped the laptop, scanned the network.
No, they didn't scan the whole network. The thermostat's part of the network. It's inside the firewall. It's connected to Opticon's entire network. You can get the whole standard configuration and password online in 30 seconds. I got it off the manufacturer's website. So they scanned most of the network. They didn't scan the thermostat.
Then what?
Then I just went exploring. It was a totally flat network, no subnets or anything. I could see everything, HR files, legal documents, R&D. When I found the blueprints, I realized I could make some money off these files.
What happened after you sent the files?
Oh, then I burned everything down. I wiped everything I could find, encrypted drives and deleted backups.
Is the number down?
The servers look corrupt. We're going to have to do a full restore from the backups.
No, the backups are encrypted.
This is deliberate.
This is a major breach.
Malware.
We gotta call the FBI.
I was just scared. I was trying to cover my tracks.
And somebody paid you how much exactly?
75 bitcoins.
Nice. Not enough to retire on, but still. All right, Brian Page. Are you sure you don't know who paid you?
European automaker Q-Car has beaten Opticon to market with their QX sedan, the world's first self-driving car. Opticon shares tumbled 11% on the news.
Now that was sobering. But did you notice in this dramatization how they got onto the network? Started with a website that then impacted the company computer. So perhaps a remote traveler, he took his computer to the bowling alley. Was there a vulnerability on that laptop that they did not find at that time? It was connected to the internet. Perhaps there's something wasn't updated. The security software certainly didn't catch it at that point. But it wasn't until they got back to the office, maybe because of the firewall. But either way, they found the malware. They began to scan the network and make sure they were clear. But what did the bad actor do? Well, he went to the thermostat. And from there, because the network was not segmented, meaning they didn't separate things like thermostats and cameras on a separate network than what they're working on, he had access to everything. And no one knew that he was there. So that, it makes you wonder, I mean, is that just a far reach, a far stretch? Well, actually, no. And maybe you recall the Target breach. That happened as a result of the HVA system that was connected to the internet. And now a bad actor was able to use that and go, and well, we know the results. Well, then credit card history, credit card data was impacted. There was a casino that was also involved in a cyber incident because of a fish tank that had some monitoring device and software connected to a computer connected to the internet. Now these things, it may seem like it's a far stretch, but these things are really happening.
So nowadays we don't just have to think about the computer, the printer, the phone. We have to think about all the internet connected devices.
Absolutely. So if you connected, protected. And so many may be wondering, well, since we updated to Windows 10 in regards to operating systems, that Windows 10 actually continues to expire and bring different versions to end of life. So as you can see on the screen right now, we're in 1909. Many may perhaps be in the 1809 version and up. But we've come across many devices that are below, running in outdated versions of Windows 10. And so they're calling those are feature updates. And this is the schedule when they come to end of life. And so it's really up to each of us, whether we're at home or at work, to make sure those things are up to date. Because if we have those, our Windows device or Apple device, our Linux, if they're all up to date, then it's less vulnerability. And that means that we get to protect the pictures of our families at home. Because we certainly would hate to have all those lost. All of our precious things that we guard on our computers, or we have in iCloud or Dropbox or OneDrive or whatever shared application, if someone were to guess our password and username, they could have access. They could take those things away from us. They could hold them for ransom, or they could be lost. And so really learning how to protect them, now we have reasons to do so. So that's really we get our inventory of our devices and applications, and we keep them both updated. But some may still wonder, well, it's just so, I don't really understand it all. Well, think of your home. Now, this is really the way that cybersecurity can be viewed. For many of us, you might view some prevention measures in our homes. We have a door, and what do we make sure that we do at our homes before we leave? We lock it. In fact, many times before you go to bed, what do?
Check your doors again.
You check your doors. You make sure they're locked. Even though you know they're locked, you unlock them and lock them again. But many aren't content with just the door and having a lock. They begin to go a step further. And that's really what we need to do when it comes to our cyber hygiene. Thinking of some things that's similar to this when it comes to protecting ourselves. Well, we have unique passwords. We use multi-factor authentication. We make sure that all connected devices are updated, their software, their firmware, and use separate networks that you might use for work or school, for your TVs and cameras, and keep them behind strong passwords. Know who connects to it. But let's just say you weren't content with just simply the door and the lock. That does much, because someone might still have to use some brute force, or they pick the lock. But let's just say you can get a little paranoid and you want a little more security. Well, then many begin to do some other things. Then there's the deadbolt. Then there's an alarm system. Well, then what if someone comes through the windows? Well, then we need to have maybe some break class sensors, some motion sensors to detect. But we really want to know if someone's in there, who's in there. So then we add some cameras, maybe even Ring, but just make sure you use strong passwords in make them unique, and use two-factor. But also, maybe you're still not, you wonder, well, what if the internet goes out? Well, many of these alarm systems now have a failover for cellular. And you have someone watching 24/7. This detection and monitoring is backed up by manpower, because you want to make sure that your family's safe, your possessions are safe. But what if we were to turn this over to kind of compare it with cybersecurity? Perhaps you have the firewall, which can be compared to your door, and your antivirus, the key. All those things are basic prevention measures. But is it really enough? We know that as the way malware is today, there are hundreds of thousands of new variants each day that are unidentified. So what if one happened to slip by? Pick the lock, you might say. Get past the firewall. Maybe because someone lets them in, because they open the door. It's not locked. It's not detecting that particular type of bad actor. Well, then there's other things that are added, such as detection and response platforms. There's network sensors that now will allow you to, it automates the process of helping you to know if another device is added to the network. We get alerts from our partners, our business owners, when new devices are added to the network. And then we get in touch with them to find out, well, we noticed there was a new device that was added. It's going to be blocked, but please, let us know if you're adding something new so that we can take appropriate measures. But what's behind that? Well, just like you might have had the alarm system monitoring, well, then we have humans that are monitoring, that are taking note of things. There's other things that you can do that really begins to add up all the event logs, so that humans, as they're going through this, they're separated as a result of the different security layers that are added. So the reality is, even if you have all of this, can you prevent bad things from happening? Well, just like at your home, you may have all of these things or your office, but does it prevent someone from breaking in? You may have dogs, you may have the alarm system, but what if there's no one to respond? What if there's no one paying attention? Either way, it doesn't stop a bad actor. And although having all of these things in place doesn't stop them, but how important the logs are when now you have hard evidence of a video camera, something extracted from there. You have the sensors that have gone off that showed what time and how they entered and who it was. Now there are fingerprints, all these things that can now be used to make sure that your insurance covers any loss. We know that prevention alone can't stop all threats. And in fact, when tools encounter a threat they weren't designed to stop, well, then it just doesn't work because it doesn't know that it was supposed to do that. And it's difficult to identify and protect every entry point. Most of us don't think the way bad actors think. But along with prevention, then we have detection, and we have monitoring. We have things that we can do that will alert us when bad things start to happen and take the appropriate steps, even if it means stopping internet connection on those devices, a phone call that lets you know that something is happening. All those things are very important. There was an interesting experience we had because although all of our clients have many of these features in place, there was an incident where we started seeing peaks of attacks at certain times of the day in a particular business. But then we saw a pattern because it started at 8:30, 9 o'clock, and happened every 3 hours, 3 times a day. And so we started looking back in the logs, and we saw this spike every day, Monday through Friday, at the same times. And at first we just, when we noticed it, we had to find out where it was coming from. And we knew it wasn't a device that we were monitoring, that we had isolated. And so what happened one day, we decided we needed to go on site. So we went on site, and we had pulled the firewall logs, and we went straight to the device. There were 2 devices that we had narrowed it down to. And when we went there, we were able to find the problem with this device. Well, it had malware on it. And the issue with that is that it was an old device. It was an old diagnostic, a piece of equipment. But we were able to stop that attack because of the detection. Prevention alone wasn't enough. And because it was running an outdated operating system, well, there was a weakness. But it wasn't connected to the internet, but it was connected to the network. And although it was trying to find its way out, it was getting blocked at the firewall. So prevention alone can't stop every threat. But what did we learn that can help minimize them by up to 85%? Identifying all of your devices, including desktops, laptops, smartphones, printers, cameras. Identify all of your applications, email software, what browsers you're going to. Are there any shadow applications that individuals are installing on the computers that you don't know? But this inventory will serve as a guide and a checklist, and that will help you to begin better protecting your network. Now, all of this may seem overwhelming, but keep learning. Be cyber smart. Remember, knowledge alone won't protect you. Application, wisdom, learning to put this information to practice at home and at work. And if it becomes a part of your cyber hygiene, well, then you're going to do it at every place. It will soon be a priority for you. You will practice it consistently. It'll get to the point that protection and prevention become automatic. And then when you're at that point, then what will you do? Well, then you'll be able to teach it to others. As a business owner or a business manager, now you will be able to set a culture that will now be integrated into your workflows. And if you do that, well, then you're on the way to better securing your business, your home, and any of those that you're surrounded with, any of those that you do business with. And so we certainly appreciate you spending some time here with us. What do we have in store for you next week? We're going to be focusing on securing these devices at home at work. We gave a nice overview. If you connect it, protect it, looking at all of these things. But then we're going to hone in a little more on the home and work scene. And then we get to healthcare. And then we're going to talk more about the IoT devices. And so we look forward to sharing more things with you, more stories. But until then, keep learning and be cyber smart.